Morning, everyone. It's very strange not being able to see anybody, so please feel free if you are there. And while we're just waiting a couple more minutes for everybody else, if you want to write in the chat where you're from or what you teach, or whether you're a specialist teacher or you're a class teacher in primary or whatever, feel free. I will wait a couple more minutes just to make sure I don't start without people. Morning, everyone. If anyone else has just joined us, I'm just waiting a few more minutes in case anyone joins us live. If you want to write in the chat who you are or what you teach, which language, or oh hi, thank you, Claire. Perfect. So we've got some primary MFL Spanish, amazing. If you want to write in the chat what you teach or who you teach, that would be great just to get us started. And I'll start in a couple of minutes. I imagine there'll be quite a few people at Remembrance Sunday event, so I'm assuming we'll get going in a couple of minutes. Amazing. Another primary Spanish. Thank you, Gloria. Primary French, amazing. Morning to anyone else who's just joining us. I will start in a couple of minutes. We're good to go. I'm just waiting so I don't start without people, but then we will be going very soon. And if you want to write in the chat who you are, where you're from, what you teach, that's great. I'll give it one more minute. I'm going to wait till 34 and then I'll start and we'll get going. If you have any questions, feel free to stick them in the Q&A box and I will check at the end. Obviously, I will at the end, you can ask anything that you want to. I will also put my contact details. My email address is there and you should be able to find me. I've just had a message pop up that says my email connection is unstable. I'm going to carry on. If you can't hear me or see me, please let me know because I'll need to run to the other end of the house, but hopefully it will be okay. It seems okay for me. Okay. Hi, Miriam as well. Okay, well, thank you for the thumbs up. Thank you. Do let me know if you can't suddenly hear me because I won't know. It's very strange not being able to see any of you or hear any of you. So do let me know if you suddenly can't see anything. Okay, I'm going to start. I'm going to share my screen so you can see. Let's go here. So let's do slide. Okay. There we go. So the title of my talk today is Simple, Effective and Fun Ways of Improving Phonemic Awareness in Primary. I'm just going to tell you what angle I'm coming at this from so you know what I've done. I did a Spanish and Linguistics degree. I was a class teacher for 5 years. I always say normal class teacher, and then the word normal doesn't do it justice because everyone is juggling about a bazillion things at once. But I tried to get as much Spanish class teaching as I could where possible. I have then gone into being a primary Spanish specialist. So I go into different schools. I've been doing that. This is my 9th year, where I get to go and just teach Spanish as PPA cover for other class teachers, which is brilliant. I love it. We speak Spanish at home. My partner is Spanish and my 2 children are growing up bilingually. So we have Spanish at home. And in 2020, I worked with Sue Cave. I'm sure lots of you have heard of Sue Cave's physical French phonics. So I worked on publishing the physical Spanish phonics. So as you can probably gather, Spanish is my stronger language. So most of the examples today will be to do with Spanish phonics, but they are completely applicable to any other language that you teach in primary or in any other setting. The plan for today's session is to talk about why phonemic awareness is so important in early language learning. And my main goal is to offer you lots of hassle-free, low prep activities to improve your students' knowledge and application of phonics. So I want you to have things that you can take away from this, that you can then go and try in your classrooms or wherever you can with as little hassle as possible. I know how tight everybody's time scales are and how much under pressure you are for all your jobs that you do. And I will try and have some time at the end of the session for any questions. My email address is on this page and a few others. It's quite a long one, so it's jbell@stmarysprimarypulborough.co.uk. Pulborough is a strange word, but hopefully if I leave it on there, you'll be able to find me. If you want to send me an email, I'm very happy to answer any questions at any point. Just feel free to email. Okay, so why should we teach Spanish or French phonics? I'm sure if you are listening to this that you are interested anyway, either because you really love it or maybe because it terrifies you slightly, who knows? But we know that phonics teaching is really, really useful, whichever language you're teaching. Those of you who are in primary, we know the stress, the emphasis that's been put on Key Stage 1 phonics, their Year 1 phonics reading test. Phonics is like being taught a code. It helps us break down those words into smaller chunks and therefore to be able to construct them back together and make sense of whole words. So it makes students more independent. If they have the access to this code, to this reading and writing and sound code, it helps them to become more independent, to do things on their own without needing to rely quite so heavily on us. And that has got to be a bonus, both for them and for us as teachers. We wouldn't expect children to learn their first language without being explicitly taught the phonemes, the phonics, the phoneme grapheme representation, the links, so how the letters and the sounds match together. So learning a second or a third language shouldn't be any different. We need to teach them it, and not just as and when. We need to teach it explicitly and in a kind of systematic way. These are the benefits. I'm hoping I've got a black line on the top of my PowerPoint. I'm hoping you can still see the titles, but it says, what are the benefits of teaching? I can't read what that says now. Phonemic, or better, maybe, phonemic knowledge and awareness. So learners become better communicators. They're more confident about their pronunciation. We know that confidence is a huge issue, more probably for thank you for the thumbs up, more probably for secondary school, maybe if they feel nervous or embarrassed about their accent, or then we're very unlikely to get confident speakers and just people who love languages. I mean, it's all about the enjoyment. It should be all about the enjoyment. If we can get that really, really sorted in primary, if we can get them speaking confidently, if they know they're pronouncing correctly, then that should remove quite a significant barrier once they get to secondary school. It will make them better at spelling. It will make them better at recognizing words when they hear them, better at spotting patterns. We know so much. I'm sure you spend a lot of your time discussing patterns about within Spanish or French, but also between languages. So if we can look at some of those phonetics, we can kind of pick those out more easily. They'll be more independent in class, as we were saying before, and just more skilled language learners. They'll have a better understanding of the general approach to building words and sentences, which will help whatever language they then go on to study. Often in primary, they say, oh, but we're doing so much work in Spanish, and then they go to the local secondary school and they do French. Well, actually, my argument would be they'll still be better linguists in general. If I can get them to be brilliant at Spanish, they'll be brilliant at French, because they're then in the habit of looking for those patterns and applying those rules. So it's really, really important. It's just super, super important. Okay. Who says we have to teach phonics? Well, the government do. Whatever our opinions are of the government in general, we have to. It's not an optional extra. It's not something we can occasionally mention when something happens to pop up. We have a duty. Two of the main objectives are to do with making sure the children can link the sound, spelling and meanings of words and develop accurate pronunciation and intonation. You can't do either of those things without looking at the phonics. From Ofsted's Languages in Outstanding Primary Schools, which was published in May 2021, it was noted that curriculum leaders had thought carefully about the phonics of the language being studied, focusing on how children pronounce sounds and how these are represented in writing. So those schools, I mean, everyone's striving to be the best teacher they can be for themselves anyway, but when Ofsted are looking for outstanding language provision, they are looking for those links to be carefully planned, thought through and explicitly taught in a systematic way. So we can spend time thinking about that as well. The 3 pillars of language learning, phonics, grammar and vocabulary, they have to be interwoven. 2 of those don't work without the 3rd. You have to have all of those elements for children to be successful language learners, both with us and also in the future. So it's not optional, but for anyone who is feeling worried about it, or if you're a non-specialist and you're thinking this is just a bit out of my reach, that I'm going to hopefully try now to go through some ways that you can sneak it in, or you can just explicitly go for it and get them to practice, get them more aware of those sounds, get them being more confident at asking those questions about the sounds as well. Because a lot of my teaching is discussion based. They ask questions and you go into it. Okay, in case you were wondering or doubting whether your students would be up for this, sometimes you think, oh, phonics might sound a bit dry, or does it sound too boring, or these are some comments that are real life children spoke to me about when I wanted to get a bit of pupil voice on the phonics that we do. So I had Raphael who said, I knew how you were going to say Julio before you even got to it. And that's really nice because he already had that sense of achievement before when we were learning new vocabulary. You don't have to then spoon feed them quite so much because he already knew that. Amelia said, I felt good when we started learning body parts and I recognized the th sound in cabeza. I remembered that the same sound is in azul. So again, amazing, making those links. They're doing that without me having to say anything straight away. Tyler said it was easier to break down the words into smaller chunks when you know the sounds, as you would expect from an English child talking about English phonics or anything. Freya said Spanish vowels are so much easier than English vowels. They always stay the same. I appreciate that's not quite the same in French to the same extent, but in Spanish, yes, it's much easier in terms of vowel sounds. And Archie said he could help his friend when he got stuck because he remembered the coughing action. It's not the entire focus of the talk. I want it to be phonics anyway, but that is one of it's the main system I've found that actually does make it easy for me to teach and fun for them and memorable for them as well, because that's all this sticky knowledge, all the things that often say, you know, what do the children absolutely just have to know? The more memorable we can make it, then we're achieving that objective. We're doing well. Okay, so Spanish phonics teaching in practice. In Key Stage 1, it tends to be more discussion based. I don't specifically teach many activities that are solely focused on phonics, partly because they are usually up to the end of year 1, at least, they are fully in the throes of doing all their English phonics tests, and I don't think their teachers would be massively thrilled if I was training them into Spanish phonics first, especially seeing as it's usually a bit simpler in Spanish. But I certainly don't shy away from answering questions. And when we look at colours or something and we look at azul, I say, well, I wonder if we were expecting that word to look like that. Which letter are we surprised to see? You know, we definitely talk about it. They ask questions. You know how Key Stage 1, they're very inquisitive. So they often do say, well, hang on a minute, why does that Z make a th sound? And then you can talk about it. I wouldn't do huge amounts of writing with them, explaining the phonics, but I certainly don't ignore it or try and shy away from it. I would definitely talk about it. In the talk today, I'm going to mainly focus on examples of activities for lower Key Stage 2 and upper Key Stage 2, because I think that's really where most of us would like the ideas, and it's a bit more kind of reasonable to slip them in when they're doing. They usually have longer lessons, and you know they can cope with a bit more. So here are some activities, nice and simple ones I'm sure you're doing all the time. I've just kind of given them a bit more of a phonicsy twist. So bingo, I'm sure we all play bingo. The children love it. It's really quick. You get your whiteboards. what I do to make phonics related bingo is I would either choose a list of phonemes. So you could have, if you're, these are Spanish examples, but obviously you could apply it to French if you were a French teacher. You'd have the ra or the k or the ra or the x or the ja. You'd have the phonemes that you have come across, that you have looked at. Or if you didn't want to just literally do the phonemes, you can take some words that are very similar, but have one letter or two letters different, so that you are really honing their skills about whether they are listening out for the word that matches or if it's a different one. Obviously, anytime you play bingo and they're listening to something in Spanish, they are having to recognize the sound of what you're saying. They're having to recognize those phonemes and see if they've got them on their board. But this makes it a bit harder because they might not know all of these words. They are just focusing on the phonemes. So what I would get them to do is I would get them to split their board into 4, choose 4 of the list that I put on the board. So they can choose any 4, either of the phonemes or of the word list, depending on what you want to practice exactly. And then as normal, I would start calling them out. If they have the word, they get to circle it. I get them to circle it, not rub out or cross out, because at the end, they need to be able to read back to me the words on their board. So not only are they listening to me saying the phonemes and making sure that they've understood if it's sapo or supo, but they then have to pronounce them back to me at the end. So I wouldn't do anything too tricky that's going to make them feel a bit unsure. And I would make sure that they were phonemes that they had seen. So like the QU, if you hadn't done a lot of practice on that, if they hadn't seen that, when they read queso, they would read it as queso, which obviously then defeats the point. So you have to do it with the phonemes that you've done to make sure that they have a chance at achieving that pronunciation. So you'd go through those, and then if you get somebody who shouts bingo, they read you their 4 words, and you can check that, yes, you did indeed read out those 4, and then you can play a different game. Or as I say, or you can just do a list of phonemes. So then if they've got a Z and you've said, then when they're reading it back to you, they would have to say, I've got, etc. So they're practicing, they're just making that connection between the grapheme, the written form of it, and the phoneme. They're making that really strong. But that's super easy, super quick, and it doesn't take much preparation on your part. 4-corner game with phonemes. Again, this is the children ask me for this every single lesson. I have to ration it out a little bit because otherwise it loses its power. But it's a really good game. I'm sure lots of you have heard of it already. So this 4-corner game is where you write down 4 phonemes, or if you're using physical Spanish phonics or physical French phonics, you can use the actions or the cards, and you put them around in 4 corners of the classroom. For the first round, the teacher stands at the front, closes their eyes. Usually helpful if you have a TA in the room to, or you need a sensible class, but you have to trust them to do that sensibly with your eyes closed. You count to 10 with your eyes still closed, and during that time they have to go and stand in one of those 4 corners. So the idea is they have to be as quiet as possible, so that you can't hear where they are. Once you've counted to 10, they're not allowed to move. Still with your eyes closed, you would then call out. So if I had that card, I would then say oh, and if they were standing in the corner that had that phoneme, then they're out and they come and sit down. And then you would carry on doing that with a few more rounds with the children who are still left in. But so it's not just me doing it. I then, out of the children who are eliminated from the round, I get them to come and stand up at the front, and they do the counting and they do the calling out of the phonemes. So if they come up to the front, they count up to 10 in Spanish, and then I would remind them, I'd say, right, you've got o, ja. And they would then call one out, and it's really nice because it's pure luck. So everyone takes part. Anyone who, even, if you've got children who struggle, or children who've just arrived from a different country, they can all still take part, and it's all total luck. So it's a really, really nice one. I would also say, once you start getting a few more people out, so you haven't got lots of children sat down bored whilst the others are counting and whilst the others are playing, get them all to count up to 10. So you can get them all to do the counting, and then just the person at the front does the phoneme. And then they're all involved, they're still all counting, they're still all practicing their phonemes, even though they don't realise. But that's a really nice one, and it's quick, and again, it takes no prep. You can just write on a whiteboard 4 phonemes, 4 sounds, easy, done. looking out for known graphemes in short text and new words. So if you had a text like this, I mean, I do this one, I've done this one before with year 2 around Easter time, which is a nice little song just to teach them. If you are wanting to look at a particular sound, so maybe if you were slightly higher up, so I also do a different spring song, but with year 4s, you can get them to look for certain sounds or listen out for certain sounds in a song, in a bit of writing that you're looking at, just as a quick activity. It doesn't need any extra preparation because you're already doing that activity. It's just putting a phonics slant on it. Okay, so they're already doing it. In case you're wondering why there's what looks like a whoopee cushion at the top of the screen, that is another one of the physical Spanish phonics actions. So we use this for in Spanish, C before E, C before I, or a Z. And you can just get them to have a little sing through once you've taught it again. Or you could do it as a pre-teaching activity. Actually, I wouldn't do that with year 2, but slightly higher up. With year 4, you could probably do that. You could say, look, we know this sound, especially when it's written like that, where it's got the C before E, C before I, Z. You can get them to look for examples of where they would find that sound. And then they can have a go at pronouncing them. So if you've got dicen here, if they know that CE is going to be pronounced thing, then they can have a good go at the rest of that word, and you can praise them and you can celebrate the fact that they could actually read that word themselves. And I've highlighted those there. So we've got the CE, we've got dicen, we've got maíz, and we've got quietecitos. So it just gives them a chance to do it by themselves, and then they feel quite chuffed when they got it right. And in terms of a bit of differentiation, if you were using these actions or these symbols, I could give that C before E, C before I, Z to children who need those prompts. If you were doing it with older children, because you of course could do this with year 5 and 6 as well, depending on the text, you could give them just the symbol, or you could just say, I want you to find the sound or the sound without the rules explicitly, and see if they can remember the context. One with is probably slightly easier because they would know a J or GE or GI. But if you've got higher ability children that you want to stretch a little bit, then you can just give them the sound or the action and say, see if you can find any examples. Again, for 3 or 4 minutes, it's not going to be half your lesson, but it's just keeping it ticking over, keeping it in the back of their minds. And then if any misconceptions come up too, then you can talk about that as a class. And it's just a nice, easy way to make sure you know where they're at, and they can prove to themselves they can do it. Missing grapheme in a word is also a really nice kind of starter activity. So I do colours in year 3. So we would have a missing grapheme in a word. And before I go on to this is the grapheme missing bit, but I'm just going to show you what I'm doing so you don't think I'm mad. These are some examples of some of the actions that we have for the certain phonemes with physical Spanish phonics. So to make it as easy as possible, each phoneme has an action. So we have a, we have u, which they love. You have to make them not keep doing that the rest of the lesson. We have o, we have r for the motorbike, the trilled r. We have for that lovely phlegmy sounding one, and we've got, which I've already shown you, that balloon deflating sound, which in English is a th, but in Spanish is written with different letters. So they would already be familiar with these sounds before you would then do the next activity. So once they've got a few phonemes under their belt, once they would recognize those, instead of writing it out, R-O blank O, which you could do, you can also do that. You don't need to use the pictures. You could do it with the sounds. You're trying to get them to think of the sound that is missing rather than the letter. So R-O, J-O, obviously, if you had the gap for the J is okay because you're checking the spelling. If you're actually trying to check the sound, you're saying it's ra, o, o. What is the sound that is missing? I'm just seeing a raised hand and a question, so I'm just going to do on that. It just says, find the phoneme in the lyrics or whilst listening. Both, definitely both. One of the activities that I've got for the upper key stage 2, the year 5, year 6, I would do while listening. It depends on the reading ability of the children you've got. It depends on the adult support you've got. It depends on other things. You would know your children better if a short reading text was achievable for them to go through and read. if you've got a particular ability group that you think actually they're going to struggle with that's going to make it harder for them to access, then you can do it while they're listening. You can even do it while you're singing or while they're singing. Think, how many times did your tongue get into that position when you're saying dicen? It's just highlighting their attention to it. There's no kind of right or wrong. All of these activities, the form you see fit as the professional teacher in that room. So there's no right, definitely both, all of the above, whatever you feel like doing at the time. And I think there was another hand up at some point. I only have one question in my Q&A, so I'll come back to, if you have a question, stick it in the Q&A and I will come back to it, but thank you for asking the questions. So yeah, for this one, what you would have is ra, o, you'd get them to think, oh, it's the kha, and then you can reveal the missing phoneme and they can see that they were right. It's kha. So you've got ra, o, and then o again, rojo. So they can hear how all those sounds fit together. Another example for marron. So you have and you have your a for the apple. Which sound is missing? O, n. M and N are the same, so we don't have actions for those. We don't need them because they are the same as they would have in English. So you'd be looking for the ra, the motorbike, and that will help them distinguish what they're hearing, the sound that they're hearing. You can do that in pairs, you could do it in small groups, just as a quick warm-up activity. At the start of your lesson, if you've done colours, just to get them switched back on, thinking about those sounds. And it should help with the spellings of the words too, obviously. That's one of the main ideas. Identifying phonemes and new vocabulary. So again, with the year threes and the colours, once we've done lots of games and lots of looking at them, I wouldn't do this in the first lesson, but once we're familiar with them, you can then use a little strip. I just chose some of the key phonemes I wanted them to look at. I didn't choose the vowels on this occasion because I thought actually they're more straightforward in Spanish. I wanted to look at some of those consonant sounds, and then they can just categorize. So in a little group, I got them to talk to each other, right, which do any of these colors that we've learned to have the th sound in, and they can tell you it's azul. And the fact that they've got the spelling where it appears in writing is just helpful too, so that they can see, oh yes, it does fit that pattern. Or for example, this double R, when we have this ra, it is a double R in marron, but also if you have an R at the beginning of a word, a single R at the beginning of a word, so rojo, rosa, it's that strong sound. So it helps them to not only differentiate the sounds, but also to practice that placement, to check, is it that sound? But that's an easy end of lesson, last 5-10 minutes. They can talk about it, they can write it down in their books, and it's just highlighting, making them aware of those sounds. I mean, I'm sure you find, like me, they're really good at reproducing the sounds. Young primary age children are great at copying you and producing those sounds. It's just making sure they know, it's that kind of metacognition. It's making sure they know what they're doing, even though they're already doing it well, if that makes sense. So for the upper key stage 2, some more advanced activities. Grapheme cards. So some children be ridiculously competitive over this, which is good fun, but you do also have to know if there's a test going on next door or something, you'll have to not do it at that particular time. From the resources, again, you could do it with letters. If you don't use physical Spanish phonics, you could use it with letters. You could use it with the sounds that they know, like the Z in azul. But these little cards, so I've got some this size and I've got some of this size. You can play all sorts of games with them. And again, it's really quick. If you laminate them, you can use them again and again and again. It's all good. And I get my children to, we number them on the back. So that one of the children did this. And then you've got a little numbered set. And then if anyone loses, I don't know if your classes are like mine, but somebody says, oh, I've got 3 of the same. And you think, oh, who's lost them from their set? If you get the children to number them, then they can say, oh, I've got number 13s, and they can get them back to them quite quickly. It stops you trying to read through and sort them all a million times a day. So action card games. We have little sets like this. And again, you can differentiate for your higher ability. If you wanted to, you could have it without the description underneath. So you could just have the H or the Y. And they lay them all out, and you call one of the phonemes out. So you would say the sound. So if I was doing the double L, I would say ja. And then they have to, in their pairs, be the first pair to pick up and show you the right card. So they work as a team. They both get turns. You know, you might have to remind them, to say, look, if you've done all the picking up, let your partner do one. And they get a point each for getting the right one. And they get an extra point if they were the first pair to do it. So they all, I mean, I wish I was sad putting all these little faces on, because their faces underneath were genuinely so excited. And I was like, oh, you can see the excitement. And I was like, I have to cover up all their little faces. But anyway, so that's a really good way. Doing it in pairs, they have to quickly pick it up. You can see in the one on the right, it was the th sound. So they quickly all pick up the right phoneme, hold it up. You can see also really quickly who's got it and who hasn't. Really good idea. And then the other way around, which gets even more competitive, is they play against each other. So still with the same cards, you can do both in the same 5 minutes, it's all good. You say the phoneme and they have to be the first one to put their hand over the correct card. And if we have the rule that whoever's hand is underneath gets the point. And again, they can both have a point if they both were on the right one, but the person whose hand underneath gets the point, an extra point rather, they get a bonus point. If only one of them gets the right one, then only they get the point. But it's really good, and it really focuses them, because they want to beat their partner. So if you know, and you can practice some of the more obscure ones, and it's just really quick, really interesting. 5 minutes, doesn't have to relate to anything else you're teaching in the lesson. It's just a quick card game. And you can do them in different sizes, and these are ones as well. If we were doing like the ja, if I find the example for that one, you don't have to have the letters on. If you're just doing the game, you don't have to have the letters on. This one has got the sounds where they appear, this one hasn't. So that's a bit harder if you wanted to go down that route. You're still using the same cards, but bigger versions. Starter activity, if you put children into groups, so they're probably already sat in groups, you can give them one of the phonemes. Again, I use physical Spanish phonics, so that's what I'm using. But if you aren't, then you can just say, right, your group, I'd like you to think of as many words as you can with the ch sound in. Great, go, 5 minutes. And they have to brainstorm and come up with as many in their groups as they can. You can differentiate that quite easily as well. So this group up here, I don't know if you can see my mouse spinning, but anyway, the one at the top right where there's the boy with the apple on the card, that I just gave them a as a vowel. And I mean, they know so many words with the a sound, but it's easier to think of a word with a vowel, with adios or hola, than it is with some of these consonants where you know, they may not have come across a topic with many of those words in with the sound in. So you can differentiate your sounds depending on who you've got in your group. But it's quite a nice one. Again, mixed ability, you just get them to talk and share ideas. The group down at the bottom had rojo and oreja, and they had Julio. And I just said, oh, well, can you think of another month? And then they hadn't immediately thought of that. And then they went, oh, junio as well. Junio, of course. So it just is a nice way that you can remind them actually that they do know a lot. They know a lot of these words. They know a lot of these sounds that they can do. The one with the D, slightly interesting spelling of 19, but they got the D part of it, so that we're, you know, we can have a little talk about the extra N that doesn't need to be there. But anyway, it's just a nice way for them. It's low pressure, it's on a whiteboard, it doesn't matter. And they can, if you want to make it competitive, you can offer points per words. If you just want to do it as a 3-minute quick warm up the minute you step in the door, that's easy too. And then it's even lower stakes. So that's quite a nice one. And again, it's just reusing your resources that you've already got, or you can just write on the board, you know, pick one of the phonemes off. You go 2 minutes. It should be quite simple, and that means that they practice. Give children opportunities to attempt spellings from hearing spoken words and pronounce new words independently using phonics. Thank you for the thumbs up. Children can discuss in pairs. So this is quite an interesting one, and I think sometimes as teachers we are so focused on what the vocabulary we need to teach and what we need to get through and what we need to practice, because we've got obviously set lists of things we want to do with them and make sure that they know. But sometimes when new words come up, so I had a year 5 class doing parts of the body, and somebody put their hand up and said, oh, what's the word for ankle? And instead of just writing it on the whiteboard for them to copy or just telling them, or I said, right, let's just all stop for a second. If I tell you that the word is tobillo, how would we write that? And I think if you did that normally, there might be a bit of a kind of a level of apprehension or don't really know, or that classic when you say tobillo, they write a letter E because it sounds like E in English. But when we stopped and we used the actions and we slowed it down, we said to, B, which is the E sound. If you know French phonics, it's the same E, it's that really wide E, which is represented with an I. And then yo, I could do the action and they all then knew it was a double L. So instead of getting strange spellings and then they're confused and then they might remember the wrong spelling, or it's just really quick. You're going to tell them anyway, obviously, because it's a good question and they want to know, but get them to see. And they're so proud of themselves. When you say, right, show me your whiteboards, how have you spelled it? And then you write it. They are so chuffed with themselves when they've spelt it right. And you say, you can tell them that you actually know how to write these words because you've got the phonics to put together. It's, you can do it, but having the actions, and I do find having the actions really helpful, just doing that yeah to be yo, they know that represents a double L because it's that karate yeah, and they can then be confident writing down unknown example of that with you now. I have got it, but and if you the presentation copying, because I want to leave some time for questions. You can find nice songs, especially if you find ones that they want to do. I mean, I don't know about yours, it's slightly waning now. Mine were obsessed with Encanto, obsessed. But actually, I just put, you've got the soundtrack on in Spanish in the background. They think they're listening to their favorite songs, and they're actually listening to Spanish music for like an hour. If you know, but you can get the songs they want to learn the words to, and you can on YouTube you can get them again to try and listen out for some of those sounds. Little word of warning, obviously with some, especially with Encanto, it's Latin American, South American Spanish. So if you were asking them to find the th sound, then they're not going to find it because it's pronounced more like a s. But that's not a problem. I wouldn't then say, oh well, I'm not going to do Encanto with you because it's a different accent. Raise it, talk to them about it. In England, gosh, we have how many hundreds of accents do we have? They're all equally valid. You would just choose your phoneme carefully. So you could get them to listen out for, a vowel sound that is the same, or a different, the ch sound, or, you just need to think before you ask them to do it. Is it the phoneme that you're expecting them to hear? That's all. But they love that. And if it's a song they want to learn, they are going to do all the motivation for you. And you can do it again. You can do 60 seconds of that as a quick, even as a quick tidying up. You put the song on as they're tidying up, and then at the end you can say, oh, I wonder, let's have a listen if we can see how many of these there are. Quite often if you put the lyrics on as well, that again helps tie that phoneme grapheme correspondence so they can see when they're hearing it. Or even if you look, silent H's, obviously you can't hear it, but let's have a look and see in the lyrics where they are, and we can look out for those. It's just about kind of tying it in. And extension activities linked to classwork. So again, on the theme of not making you have to then make more resources, which nobody has any time for. If they're doing classwork, if they're doing some reading, if they're doing some writing, just as an extension, either for people who have finished or just as a general activity that they can all do, or if they need a bit of a brain break and they need to stop and they've been working hard for 20 minutes or whatever, then you can just get them to use a bit of work they're already doing. It shouldn't be any extra work on you. It's just keeping it ticking over. I think if phonics is something that comes up every lesson, they won't think anything of it. They won't think of it as a barrier. They won't think of it as something hard. It will just be every lesson something. There is a conversation at some point about some phonics. These as well. Just like you would have a word mat if you were teaching, geography, or if you had a knowledge organizer for one of your Spanish or French lessons out, have a phonics mat out. So we have we would have one of these, and it just means that they're used to seeing it. They're used to referring to it. If you said to them, oh well, actually if we're writing this word, what would that have, if it starts with this sound, ra, how would we think that's going to be written? The ones who are confident might not need to use it. That's fine. But the ones who do can refer to it and feel confident that they are on the right lines. Or if they want to check with you, they want to say, oh, I really wanted to spell this, or you know, how would it have been spelled? You can then just literally point it. They're not trying to access your bank of knowledge in your head. They have got the tools on their table that they can start to access it, either with a friend, or I mean, by all means, they can talk to you as well. But it just means they get that increased sense of independence and confidence at using the phonemes themselves. Sometimes it might work if you had that they could have their own copy of the phoneme sounds in their books, although depending on what you're doing, sometimes you end up with them flicking backwards and forwards, so I tend to just have it out like a word map. I just find it easier, and then also you can kind of just keep them and hand them out. I laminate those as well, probably shouldn't for the plastic, but then you don't need one in every class's color photocopy. You don't need to photocopy one for every child. If you just have a set of 30, or even you could probably get away with 20, and then they can have one between two, then you can just hand them out and they can refer to them. There are more games in the book if you were interested in finding out some more, but it's really just trying to make it as part of every bit of the lesson as possible. So don't treat it as a separate thing, or oh, now I have to do a lesson on phonics because they got that wrong last week and now I need to do a whole 40-minute. I would just get it in there as often, little and often, like with most things, is better than doing a big focus on it. And the more you drip feed it in, the less they'll even think about it as being something daunting. It will just be one of the other questions. And I don't know about you. I think that the questions the children have is one of the nicest bits, and they ask, why is it that, and why is it spelt like that, and why is it, that's the really nice bits where you can really discuss it, but it gives them the confidence and the independence to do it themselves. I think that's the idea. I'm gonna answer. I've got another question. I'm just going to leave. Oh, I don't know if, hopefully you can't see my question and answer box. I don't know if you can see my question and answer box. If I move it out the way a little bit, even if you can see it, my email address is at the bottom of that, jbell@stmarysprimarypulborough.co.uk. And Gloria said, where could I find the phonic map with the images? So these are in physical Spanish phonics. So they do it for you. Again, the idea is that this should be the easiest thing for the teachers. That's why this system, I think, works so well, because it's memorable for them and it's also easy for you. So in the book, it has everything that you can just photocopy. I think Priscilla, who is in charge of Brilliant Publications, has said that they are also now, because originally it comes with a CD, but I think they've said that lots of computers don't have a CD drive anymore. So they're going to now do it on like a USB, like a memory stick format. But everything is in the book. You just photocopy it and laminate it. But it's all in here, all the actions, everything. As I say, the whole point. You also get you get whiteboard files that have images that you can drag and copy into your smartboard files, and they have the sounds on. So if you're a non-specialist, or you are trying to get non-specialists to feel more confident, then you can, when you're doing your introduction to all the colors or to the numbers or whatever topic you're doing, you can just drag them from the file into your smart file. You don't have to faff about trying to get recordings or trying to get the symbols. There's already one. I don't know if I can show you. So you just slide it across onto your smart file. So then if you wanted to click on it, if you were looking at Athul, you can drag over the Z one and click on it, and it's there without you having to do anything to it. Do you explicitly teach strong and weak vowel combinations like UE and abuelo? I don't think it's really necessary. I mean, I think if you're pronouncing abuelo, they can hear the strength of it. I've put it this way. I wouldn't deliberately say, oh no, I'm not going to talk about it. I've never had a child either ask me particularly about it or pronounce it wildly wrong. I've never heard a child say abuelo. I think they just, from listening to you and from hearing it, it's obvious, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. I've never had a child say abuelo. Oh, but you told me it was u. I think it just, from the flow of it, abuelo, they just get the stress of it right. You know, by all means, you can talk about it, that nothing should be off limits. I would feel free to talk about whatever you want to talk about. There's, you know, some children absolutely soak that stuff up, they love it, and others it's probably a bit unnecessary. It's not wrong, but it probably is, it's a bit overkill if you went into the vowel stresses and things. But you know, it's your class, your children. you do what you like with the sounds. And I think, let me just check the time. Yeah, it is 15:15. You're very welcome. I will, as I say, my email address is there. Please feel free to ask. I hope it's just been a little bit useful, and just give you the confidence and the trust in yourself as well, that it doesn't have to be a big thing. It's just drip feed it in every now and again, and swap one game that wouldn't be a particularly phonics one for a phonicsy game. They won't notice, they'll love it, and it shouldn't be much prep for you. So hopefully it will help them make those links a bit more easily. But thank you very much, and please feel free to email. I will get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the sessions. Bye.